Hey everybody, how's it going? I hope you're all doing well today. So I wanted to make a video regarding domestic cups for all the soccer slash football fans out there. What I really wanted to touch on was kind of what the point of the cup should be. And once we've established that, what the ideal format should be to run these cups. So the first point I want to make is that in most countries around the world in the domestic league, we pretty much know ahead of time, before the season even starts, which clubs have a realistic shot of winning the title. So, for example, in Germany, it's pretty much Bayern Munich most years, maybe a couple other teams sprinkled in there. In Portugal, it's pretty much always going to be Porto, Benfica, you know, Scotland, you have Rangers and Celtics. So basically, if we already know what it's going to be like in the league, why not make a format for the cup in which the trophy is open to more clubs? And so I think once we've established that, we need to look at how you would format a competition like a domestic cup to make it open to more clubs to win or make really deep runs, go to the semifinals, go to the finals, something like that. And I have come up with 3 criteria to sort of make it more of an open competition. And if you bear with me, I'm looking at a Word document right now to read what I've written, so I'm not going to be looking at the camera the whole time. So anyway, number 1, the first criteria that I would think we would need is to have a random draw. That basically means it isn't seeded. In some cups, whenever the big clubs come in, the bracket is already determined. And it seems to me that this is usually done so that the big clubs don't have to play each other until quarterfinals, semifinals, that sort of thing. But in other cups, like the FA Cup, when the Premier League teams come in at the round of 64, it's totally random. Teams like Chelsea and Manchester United could, just as well meet in the finals as they could the round that they come in the third round. So I think if you have an open, random open draw, it's cool because you get to see these big matchups first, and it also doesn't pander to the big clubs by allowing them to wait until later on to play each other. So that's my first criteria. My second one is that we need an early start, so to speak, for the big clubs in the cups, and it's really a pretty simple concept to get around. The later a club starts, the less rounds they have to get through to make the final, and the higher their chances are of reaching the final. So, for example, in Italy, the way it works is the top 8 clubs don't have to start until the round of 16. Well, if that's the case, you only have to get through 3 rounds to make the final, which really isn't that hard. But in England, they start at the round of 64. That's an extra 2 rounds that you have to get through to make the final. The chances are lower for those clubs, and it makes it a more interesting open competition. And the last criteria that I have is that, and this might be the biggest factor, is whether or not each round the ties are played if they're just a one-game thing or if they're played over 2 legs. So, the cool thing about football and really sports in general is that in any given game, any team can win. You could see this in the domestic league. You see this in cups all the time. Obviously, the bigger team should win, but we see upsets all the time, and that's really cool. And so, for example, a few years ago, I think Oldham beat Liverpool in the FA Cup. That's great. They got the upset. They got to go to the next round. If you add an extra, game to that and make it a 2-legged thing, it's really not going to be that big a deal that they won the first game, because the chances of them advancing to the second round are going to decreased significantly because Liverpool would have had that extra game to fix whatever mistakes they made, and they're more than likely going to go to the next round. So if you have 2 games for each tie, it really favors the big clubs. And one other thing that is a pretty rare occurrence in domestic cups, but does happen in some, is that they have a group stage. Right now, this is in countries like Sweden. I think Turkey has that. In Mexico, in the Copa MX, they have a group stage. Group stages, first of all, I think they're kind of boring. They last a really long time. After 3 or 4 games, in what is usually a 6-game, like mini league, we already know who's going to advance anyway. And it's really it really works mostly for the big clubs because you can have 1 or 2 bad games, and as long as you get your stuff together for the next 3 or 4, you're going to be fine. You're going to advance anyway. So group stages, they take a long time, and they really help out the big clubs. So those are my criteria for having an open, I don't want to say fair, but a more open, entertaining, unpredictable domestic cup competition. So what I want to do now is give a few examples of cups that do follow that sort of thing and cups that really don't, and they kind of pander to the big clubs. So I'll start with the cups that are going okay. So for example, in England, in Germany, Switzerland, France, the biggest clubs start at the round of 64, so they got to get through 5 rounds to reach the finals. The ties are just 1 game, except in countries like England, where if it's a draw, they have to do a replay. But it's still not a two-legged. It's not a two-legged thing, and it's not seeded. It's a random draw. Bayern Munich. Well, no, in Germany, in the round of 64, the biggest clubs play the small clubs, but after that, it's random. But anyway, in countries like this, a lot of times we see clubs from the 2nd or even 3rd divisions making runs into the quarterfinals, to the semifinals, even the finals. Last year in the FA Cup, this is the 2013-2014 season, we had Millwall and Wigan, both from the Championship, England's 2nd division, make it all the way to the semifinals. We had Duisburg, I don't know how to pronounce it, I don't speak German that well, from the the 2nd Bundesliga, make it all the way to the final a few years ago. And in other countries where it doesn't work like this, you're really not going to see that sort of thing very often. A country that should really be commended for the way they do it is in Norway. Norway, the biggest clubs start at the round of 128, which is really cool in my opinion. I think that would open up a lot of unpredictability in that country. And in so in some countries where it's really not that great, for example, Spain, the biggest clubs in La Liga start in the round of 32. The bracket's already predetermined, so you already know who for example, when Barcelona and Real Madrid could end up playing each other. And the ties are played over 2 legs, so it's really not that big of a surprise when the final or the semifinal is an El Clasico matchup, because the way the tournament's set up, why wouldn't that be the case? Another one that really isn't that great is in Italy, where I think the way it works is the clubs that finish 1 through 8 in Serie A the previous season don't have to start until the round of 16. They don't have to play each other in that round. So it's basically, one club, for example, let's say Juventus is the 1st seed. In the round of 16, they're just waiting on someone to come from the previous rounds and play them. The bracket's already there. You already know what's gonna happen. And then once the semifinals happen, it's a two-legged thing before they reach the finals. So, why wouldn't one of the top 2 or 3 clubs? Why wouldn't the final be between one of the top clubs? So, those are just some examples of cups that are cool, cups that aren't cool. If you're going, if we're basing this off the idea that the cup should be open, to more clubs than say the league is. And you know, I'm not advocating for anything that would make it, you know, easier for the smaller clubs. I'm just advocating for something in which you know, it isn't formatted where big clubs would have an advantage. You know, let's say in the FA Cup there was like a round of 1,000 and the big clubs had to start then. The chances would still be highest for clubs like Chelsea and Arsenal and Manchester City reaching the final. But those chances are going to go way up if they're having to start, if they're starting later on, like the round of 16. And you know, if we're not doing two-legged ties and it's just one game, clubs like Chelsea should be beating the smaller clubs anyway. But like I touched on earlier, if it's just a one-game thing, that really does open it up. So anyway, just to kind of touch on my my earlier point, really all I got to say is we already know before the league starts who's going to be in there for the the title race. So why not make something for the cups that kind of makes it open and unpredictable, and a greater number of clubs and fans are able to start the competition and actually think that maybe they have a chance at winning it. So that's my video. Those are my ideas. I'd love any feedback that you have, whether you agree, disagree, you want to add something, that's fine. So anyway, thanks for watching, and have a good day.